Okay, on that note, let's get off the sidelines, head into the arena. My panel's here: CNN political director, Washington bureau chief David Chalian, Capitol Hill correspondent for Puck News, Mariana Sotomayor, Democratic Congressman from Maryland, Johnny Olszewski, and former Republican Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry. Welcome to all of you. David Chalian, the president there, clearly agitated. Kristen Welker pressing him, telling him he's not provided evidence. At the same time this is all happening, votes are still being counted in California. I don't think anybody questions that that is an example of a certain degree of incompetence, perhaps, but malice and incompetence are not the same.
Also structural, according to the law in California, because you can, according to the law in California, they are allowed to accept ballots and count them as long as they are postmarked by election day or before, if they are received up to 7 days after. Now, I don't know, whether or not that's a good system, that is up to the people of California to elect representatives to deal with that and change the law if they don't want that to be the law in their state of how votes are counted. Because it is kind of annoying to those of us that report on elections that we have to wait that long.
Those of us who would like to know on election night.
But
many states
that does not mean that there is evidence of fraud. And to then play the game that Speaker Johnson's playing, that, this just stinks to high heaven because it takes so long, so we have to get rid of the appearance of any impropriety. There's no appearance of impropriety. They're counting votes, and it takes time. And what we know is that, and this has been true for several elections in a row now in California, that the votes that are counted last and have arrived late tend to be more democratic in nature than the votes that were handed in by election day, on election day, or cast in person at a center. And that is what is happening here. That's how Nithya Raman overtook Spencer Pratt in the LA mayor's race, because more voters who cast their legitimate ballots for her, their votes weren't counted until these more recent days.
Right. Of course, the progressive challenger there. Congressman McHenry, what is the president doing when he does this? And what is Speaker Johnson doing when he
he's getting us to talk about this rather than anything else. And so this focuses the energy on something that the president has a large following on, the question of the election. By the way, echoing what Hillary Clinton said in 2016 when she lost, that of course she couldn't have lost, it had to be rigged. This is what losing
By the way, he
candidates
won
say
in
after
2016, and he still questioned the legitimacy of the election in certain states in 2016, even though he had won the election.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so here's the example of California, where it feeds into the narrative that California is a broken state, frankly, number one. Number two, large Democratic states tend to report late on election night and late their election returns, which feeds into this malevolence about their actions. When I agree with you, as you stated, there's a difference between malice and incompetence. And I look at California and a heavily Democratic state and a heavily Democratic city that they are struggling to count votes, just like in New York.
In New York, it really is perhaps more incompetence than in California, where, as you point out, the system is designed this way.
But it's a stupid system. It is a stupid system. They don't have to do it this way. A large state like Florida, the best example I have is Florida. After the 2000 election, what did? They cleaned up their process. It is the first large state to report on election night. It's a fairly extraordinary thing, the reforms that they put in to having a clean, durable, strong election. But this is also where we are with our politics. Everything is questioned. Right? Even to the nature of the counting of elections is questioned to its core. Both parties have done it. Both parties now at the federal level have tried to nationalize all these state and local election laws. The Republican Party with the SAVE Act most recently, the Democratic Party at the beginning of Joe Biden's first big vote, H.R. 1 in the House, for 2 Congresses for Democrats, was nationalizing the elections. Why? Control and power. Both parties are in it. It does not look good. And this is also a bigger societal problem that we have right now. The president's just the large mouthpiece for it right now.
Yeah, I want to get the congressman to weigh in on this in a second. But I do think we need to focus in on President Trump has, since he has been on the public stage as a presidential candidate in a serious way, continued to say over and over and over again that our elections are rigged. And it is worth remembering that the people that support him will believe what he says. He influences their opinions. We have gone all the way back to 2016. The last 10 years, this is what the president has sounded like over that time.
And I'm afraid the election's going to be rigged, I have to be honest. They even want to try to rig the election at the polling booths.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged.
This year, they rigged an election. They rigged it like they've never rigged an election before.
The election was rigged and stolen.
The election was rigged. That election was rigged.
The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020.
By the way, that election was totally rigged.
I don't know. If you have a rigged vote out there, that's the problem. The votes are rigged.
And again, just to circle back, one of those clips we saw was on January 6th of 2021, where a mob of people then left that speech, stormed the United States Capitol, took action based on what the president was saying when he claimed that the election was rigged. Now, Congressman, this is something I will say to Congressman McHenry's point, some Democrats have started to say in the context of our elections, and it always raises a little bit of a red flag for me because there has been so much pushback from Democrats defending rules and norms. Now, there are a lot of, base voters, frankly, who are kind of sick of the rules and norms and think that the rules should be, they should be fighting the same way they perceive Republicans to be fighting, dirty. What say you about where your party is now and whether people should and can trust our election results?
Well, I think your point about January 6th, it's the culmination of that repeated mantra, especially by the most important political figure in our country to say that. We get a January 6th riot, storming of the Capitol when the president keeps saying that. I think it's irresponsible for the speaker to also say that in the context of not having any evidence. There is no widespread fraud. And look, yes, Democrats should own that too, but I think it's irresponsible for leaders of any stripe at any level to say that without evidence. I'm someone who won an election by 17 votes, who then oversaw elections at the local level. We have people who are working very hard to make sure these elections are safe and secure. It took weeks for my manual recount to get redone. The most important thing is that it got done right. Do I want to see California count their ballots faster? Absolutely. Will it instill more trust? Absolutely. But that does not mean that these elections are rigged, and I think it's incredibly irresponsible of the president and the speaker to suggest just that.
I think Hillary Clinton was wrong to say that, too.
Agree.
It was Vladimir Putin that elected Donald Trump in 2016, and she said that for years. I'm probably saying it somewhere today. This is what losing candidates say, right? Is it was rigged against him. I'm sure the person you beat by 17 votes is still harumphing about the jerks that voted incorrectly.
I
won my
election officials.
Well, that's shocking because the person I beat by 85 votes in my first election to Congress, I'm sure right now, if he's watching, is thinking where I should go, which is some hot place, I would think.
Well, it's worth noting, I think, that Hillary Clinton did concede, right? Because that's another piece of this, right? Because there have been candidates out there that don't want to concede. Mariana Sotomayor, how much concern is there? I've picked it up from, if you have a conversation with Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, for example, he's been very public about writing about concerns around the midterm elections, mechanisms that could be used to declare some sort of emergency and potentially nationalize elections on the Republican side, something historically conservatives have been opposed to, but that's something he's warned about in terms of the Trump administration. I mean, what are you hearing on the Hill? Because I wouldn't be surprised if we get, all sides saying the elections are rigged. And I have a lot of questions about where that leaves us.
Absolutely. No, you're totally right. When it comes to Democrats, there have been conversations since, I would just say, even it started a year ago, because like you just laid out perfectly, Trump is very predictable on this point. So Democrats are going into this, assuming if they win, whether the House or the Senate, that Trump is going to claim that the election is rigged. Okay, how do we prepare about that? They have been having conversations with a number of secretaries of state across the country just to get a sense and know how their lawyers are preparing. How do they run elections? Because if Trump and the administration do start doling out or suing states or wanting voter rolls from this midterm election, Democrats want to be ready. And I know that there's efforts both on the House side and also the Senate side, and they're both in conversations to make sure that at least congressional Democrats are on the same page. So that is already part of the conversation. Not as much conversation among Democrats if a Democrat were to claim and say that the elections were rigged. Republicans, of course, want to pass the SAVE Act. I'm not sure how or when. There's not much time left before the election. We're seeing already.
There's also not enough votes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Not enough votes to probably be able to make it happen, but it's something that the base wants. When I've been talking to congressional Republicans, what they're hearing back home, when it comes to their primaries, they constantly say, well, our voters want to see the SAVE Act done, but don't know if it's going to happen.
I would just note that the other thing that Democrats have said to me, they sort of look at this in two phases that they're preparing for. The pre-election phase and the concern if the president's going to deploy ICE to polling sites and try to interfere with the election that way, versus the post-election certification process, getting to January 3rd and the installation of the new Congress. And I think they have like teams of lawyers sort of divided up, focused on both of those phases.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Last
And we
word?
also have held national elections even in the midst of world wars and civil war. So the House and the Senate know how to deal with this stuff. This is also the reason why we have state-based rules for elections. So we should not be nationalizing elections, regardless of what both parties are saying.